Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all the nominees. Ms. Hodge, I want to ask you about an article that you wrote for Bloomberg about affirmative action in universities. You argued that opposition to race-based affirmative action, I'm going to quote you now, is rooted in part in the belief that racism and systems that imposed barriers based on race in American society no longer exist, end quote. I've been under the impression that the argument was actually the opposite, that race-based affirmative action imposes race-based barriers on particular racial groups. Now, your article was about the Harvard case, so I take it you're familiar with that case. Is that fair to say?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Yes, I was writing an article following the decision that was made by the First Circuit in that particular piece of Bloomberg.
Gotcha. So the court documents, court filings from that case, from the Harvard case, state that, quoting now, Asian Americans needed SAT scores that were 140 points higher than white students, all other quantifiable variables being equal, to get into these elite schools. The same court filings also show that Asian American students who had the same score as African American students were about 25% likely to get into Harvard, whereas the African American student was 95% likely to get into Harvard. So basically, what the documents show is, and I don't know if there's much dispute about this, that Asian Americans are systemically discriminated against with these race-based policies. That's a problem, don't you think?
Senator, I will say, and thank you for the question, I'm not intimately familiar with the entirety of the report or all of the information that's contained in it. I know it is cited in the case. However, I would say that with the case that was before the court and currently now is on certiorari and coming before the Supreme Court, that the issue of race as a factor in admissions and utilized in universities is obviously what's going to be contemplated by the court, and understanding that the strict scrutiny standard is applicable. It would be a determination as to whether or not there's a compelling governmental interest, and if it's narrowly tailored to afford that interest for all who are asserting the argument.
Yeah, but is it a problem? I guess my question is it a problem for universities to make it harder for members of a certain race to be admitted to their university, to do it deliberately? Is that a problem? That's what your article's about. I'm asking. You've expressed an opinion on this, so I'm just asking about your opinion. Don't you think that's a problem?
Senator, thank you for the question. The article was written in the context of really providing, in essence, a procedural roadmap of what had transpired.
Yeah, but you expressed, though, I'm sorry to interrupt you, it's just I've got so little time and I have the article in front of me. I enjoyed reading it. But you express your personal views, which is fine, by the way. I'm just asking about them. Your personal views on this case, and you say that the arguments of those who are arguing against Harvard's policies are actually anti-diversity. You say that they fail to overcome a principle that's of paramount importance to the country. I'm quoting you now: diversity matters, and its value is immeasurable, especially in education. I'm just asking you whether or not having Asian Americans present and able to be admitted on a fair basis with members of other racial groups, if that isn't in fact an interest that serves diversity. I mean, don't you think that that's important?
Senator Hawley, to your question, and thank you again for it, what has been stated by the court through years of dialogue and deliberation over this specific issue of affirmative action is that diversity matters.
And does that include for Asian Americans?
For everyone.
And that's your personal opinion, too?
I'm stating based upon how the court has, I'm not putting my personal opinion. I believe that if I'm so fortunate to be confirmed to the district court, that my personal opinion would have no role in the deliberations that I would conduct. I would base all of my decisions on the facts presented, the arguments presented by counsel and or the individual litigants, as well as the law, and apply the law and precedent to whatever's presented to me.
But surely you could agree with the statement at this level of generality that deliberate discrimination against Asian Americans is wrong. Is that fair to say?
Senator Hawley, I say that discrimination is prohibited, and people who are discriminated against under the law, obviously the work I also do in terms of employment discrimination, if someone is discriminated against based on a protected category, that is something that that's protected against under the Constitution.
But it's not wrong. I mean, you can't just say it's wrong. I'm trying to understand why you're splitting the hairs the way you're splitting them.
Senator, I'm not splitting hairs. Discrimination is illegal.
But my question to you is, discrimination against Asian Americans is wrong, yes?
Discrimination against anyone is wrong. Yes.
Judge Perez, let me just finally ask you here, and I'll have some more questions for others of you for the record, but our time is very limited. I just want to ask you about something you said in some interviews when you were running for judge. You were critical of mandatory minimum sentences. You called them political in nature. Is that still your view, that mandatory minimum sentences are problematic? You're an opponent of those?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Senator, in my almost 7 years now as sitting as a state court judge and hearing matters that involved, to this day, mandatories at times, including third strike laws, I have been consistent in my application of those and following the law as directed by statute and by the case law under Pennsylvania law.
But do you think that they're political in nature, and are you an opponent of them? I guess is my question. I'm just asking about what you said about your own views. So is that still the case, or have you changed your mind?
At this point, sir, my perspective is very different. I made those statements when I was an advocate and being a neutral jurist for the past 7 years. It's now 100% my job, day in and day out, to apply the law to the facts as I see them in my courtroom. And if the mandatory minimum applies, I will apply that mandatory minimum.
And are you still anti-death penalty inherently? You said you were anti-death penalty inherently. Is that still the case?
Again, Senator, at the time that I said that, I was an advocate who previously did work in death penalty cases. At this time, and for the last 7 years, I've been a jurist with a record of abiding by the law and applying that law to the cases before me.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hodge, I have been concerned for some time that this administration, in making judicial nominations, is not seeking out people who will fairly and impartially follow the law, but rather is systematically nominating people who are partisans, people whose views are sharply out of the mainstream, and people who are extreme. As I look at your record, I see considerable indicia that you follow that same pattern. Is it true that you previously stated, quote, "The root cause of the killing of black people in America is systematic racism"?
Thank you for the question, Senator. To a colleague who just asked a similar question moments ago, that statement was made in an article that I wrote following the killing of George Floyd, and I provided what I would say is a revision to that, which is it's one of the root causes. But the statement as written is what I did write.
Well, you also described possible solutions to what you described as, quote, "the pandemic of racism," and you specified two in particular: eliminating qualified immunity and, quote, "reallocating police funding." Now, everyone in this committee hearing room knows that reallocating police funding is a commonly used phrase that is also described as defunding the police or even abolishing the police. Do you still think, to use your phrase, reallocating police funding is a good idea?
Senator, thank you for the question. I believe that when I noted those two specific things in the article, that I was taking from what the dialogue was, particularly in this body, in terms of potentially revisions or considerations for how to address crime and incidents of violence. And with that, I believe that all of those considerations are things that are left to the policy level, that is not something that, if I were so fortunate to be confirmed as a U.S. District Court judge, that I would speak to or have any role in whatsoever, that is something that is a policy consideration that is left to a body such as the legislative body.
So, Ms. Hodge, I will say, I'll make a prediction for you, which is that the Democrats on this committee will give lots of speeches about how they don't support defunding the police. But in your nomination, I'm going to predict every single Democrat is going to vote to confirm you, and the basis for my prediction is every single Democrat has voted to confirm every single judicial nominee that's come from President Biden, no matter how radical. They keep voting for nominees who've advocated, as you have, abolishing or defunding the police, or as you phrased it, reallocating police funding, which is taking the money away from the police. Now, your successor, you were the interim district attorney in Philadelphia. Your successor, Larry Krasner, has become quite infamous. He is one of the many George Soros prosecutors funded with massive amounts of money from Soros. And under his tenure, he has systematically refused to prosecute violent crime. He has released violent criminals, and we've seen in Philadelphia crime rates skyrocketing, murder rates skyrocketing, carjacking skyrocketing. Do you believe the policies of District Attorney Krasner have played a significant role in the escalating murder rates and crime rates in the city of Philadelphia?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The crime rates in Philadelphia, as well as the crime rates across the country, are a sad and stark reality of the concerns that we all have regarding violent crime. Specific to your question, myself, having been the district attorney of Philadelphia, having worked alongside and with law enforcement for a number of years, have the utmost respect and appreciation for the work that they do. And I also, when I served as district attorney...
Okay, Ms. Hodge, we have very limited time.
I
so my
understand.
question was, have the policies of Mr. Krasner contributed to the skyrocketing crime rates in Philadelphia?
I believe that in order to address an issue as complex as crime in Philadelphia or any city in this country or any place in this country, that it involves a cross-systems interaction between many individuals. And so
Ms.
I
Hodge,
can't speak
are
to...
you willing to answer yes or no?
I believe that I can't answer it yes or no because I believe it's complex. So
You also said in 2021, and this is a quote, you need to look at everything with a diversity lens. You need to take a moment to put on those glasses and look at every aspect, from hiring to promotion to business development to marketing to strategy to front-facing clients to everything. You need to have that lens. How could a litigant in Pennsylvania have confidence if they were appearing before you as a judge that they would be treated fairly, given your statement that everything has to be looked at from a racial lens? The Constitution is quite explicit protecting equal protection. What confidence would a litigant or a criminal defendant have when you publicly said everything needs to be looked at through that lens?
Senator Cruz, if you don't mind, if you could repeat the statement or the quote again, because that would be helpful.
Sure.
Advance me answering the question.
You need to look at everything with a diversity lens. You need to take a moment to put on those glasses and to look at every aspect, from hiring to promotion to business development to marketing to strategy to front-facing clients to everything. And you need to have that lens. That was the quote.
Senator Cruz, I don't recall the context within which I made that quote, so it's difficult for me to state whether or not it's regarding a matter or a case as opposed to another setting or environment where I may have made or provided that particular statement. However, I will say that I believe that everyone, and I've done this for a number of years in my work specifically as a prosecutor, deserves equal protection under the law, upholding the law and following the law and applying it evenly. And in doing so, I believe that if I were so fortunate to be confirmed, that anyone who would come before me would know that I want to hear all of the facts and circumstances. I want to hear and listen to the complete argument of counsel and the parties, and then apply the law to the facts and apply precedent in order to go ahead and render an appropriate decision.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Kennedy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to each of you. Ms. Hodge, I'll start on the end. I believe you have written, and I want to quote, "The root cause of the killing of black people in America is systemic racism." Did you say that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yes,
You're
that
welcome.
was a statement that was in an article that I believe I wrote shortly after the killing of George Floyd.
Right. You believe that the root cause of black-on-black crime in America is systemic racism?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I will say,
welcome.
I'm going to clarify. in that writing and in that quote, the quote is accurate. I would revise it to say that it's one of the root causes. And to your point about black on black crime or crime in the country generally, any crime, there are many causes as to why people engage in criminal activity.
Okay. You also have advocated, quote, reallocating police funding. What do you mean by that?
In that, I believe in a different, or maybe the same article or something else that I
was the
had
same
written.
one.
Same article. I believe I listed a number of things that have been proposed and I believe were being considered by Congress in following George Floyd.
Right. What do you think? How do you think we should reallocate police funding?
Well, I will clarify that I wasn't advocating for the reallocation. That was one of the things that was listed, but I believe
I think you were actually. Your quote is you advocated for, quote, reallocating police funding, and I'm just asking what you have in mind.
Well, Senator, it has been some time, so I will say that I may not be recalling the entirety of the statement correctly. I thought I had listed it as one of the things that was proposed, but to your question, I believe that when a body such as Congress has the ability to make that consideration.
No, I'm asking what you think, how you think we should reallocate police funding.
Senator, I believe that that is something that is left to the body of Congress. I don't have an opinion to offer on that.
You don't have any opinion whatsoever?
I believe that that's something that is left to those who are determining
All right.
policy.
You also advocated in the same article that we should eliminate qualified immunity for police officers. Is that correct?
I would state that that is listed again as one of the listed proposed ideas that was being discussed. Actually, I
No, ma'am,
extracted,
you advocated for it.
Senator, I extracted that from what was being discussed by Congress at the time following George Floyd.
No, ma'am,
So
you advocated for it. I'm looking at the speech was entitled, quote, mandate for change will require collaboration. And you advocated eliminating qualified immunity for police officers. And I'm just asking you, did you advocate for it? And if so, do you still have that position?
Senator, thank you for the question. I did not advocate for the elimination of qualified immunity, and qualified immunity is a doctrine within which has been recognized by the court. And if I were so fortunate to be confirmed, I would abide by the Supreme Court precedent and apply the law as it is stated.
Okay, so you deny advocating for it?
I would, to your question, Senator, I did not advocate for the elimination of qualified immunity. I listed it as one of the things that was being discussed and presented as something that was being dialogued by this body amongst others across the country as to be considerations.
Okay. I don't think that's accurate. Judge Perez, I believe you have said that, quote, the drug war is a joke. Drugs are all about economics. It's like fighting a staph infection with neosporin. You're not getting at the underlying causes for trafficking, education, and poverty. Did you say that?
Senator, I made that statement back, I believe, in 2015
Right.
when I was running for judge for the Court of Common Pleas, and as an advocate, I did make that statement. Yes, sir.
Okay. Why do you think the drug war is a joke?
Sir, I would say that my choice of language in 2015 as I was running for judge and campaigning was colorful. I will say this, that in my time as both a defense attorney as well as a judge sitting in criminal court, what we are seeing is a large percentage of individuals who are arrested for smaller amounts of narcotics.
Let me ask
That
you one
in
more
particular-
question. Excuse me for interrupting, but the chairman's given us 5 minutes for 4 nominees for lifetime appointments. Last year, DEA estimates that enough fentanyl came across our southern border to kill every man, woman, and child in America 7 times. 7 times. And I'll bet you just about everybody in this room knows someone who had a teenager who died of fentanyl poisoning. Do you think that's a joke?
Sir, it's not that it is a joke. It is the full context was with regards to whether or not it is an effective measure for stemming the tide of narcotics use in our communities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.